Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment of Health Professional Radio. In this segment, we're going to be speaking with returning guest Dr. Jim Woody. Now, Jim's CEO of 180 Life Sciences, a newly formed clinical stage biotech company that's focused on novel drugs for unmet needs in inflammatory diseases, fibrosis, and pain. He's coming back to talk about the findings of a recent phase 2 clinical trial on the fibrosis and anti-TNF program in fibrotic disease of the hand. Welcome back, Jim. How have you been?
Very well. Thank you.
For listeners who may not be familiar with you as a contributor, give us a little bit of your professional background and talk a bit about 180 Life Sciences.
I'm a physician, pediatrician, a pediatric immunologist in training. In my past, I was chief scientific officer of a biotech company called Centocor. We were the very first ones to invent and develop an agent against the inflammatory cytokine called tumor necrosis factor, or TNF, and we were the first ones to ever test it in patients. Interestingly enough, the TNF market is about $40 billion a year. Mm-hmm. It's the largest selling biotech in the country, actually in the whole world. I went on from there and I ran Syntex, the pharmaceutical company, after Roche had bought it, and from there helped start quite a few biotech companies, and joined up with my colleagues just about a year and a half ago when we first talked in November of 2020, though. It's June of 2022 now, so it's been about a year and a half since we talked. And so our company's doing well, and we have good results from our initial clinical trial.
Could you go a bit deeper into what TNF is? And I understand that 180 Life Sciences, as you said, is repurposing anti-TNF for unmet needs.
Right. Yeah. In your body, there's lots and lots of proteins circulating around. Some of those proteins tell your immune cells what to do: turn on, turn off, become more active, less active, go somewhere, do things. One of these proteins that modulate your immune system, these are called generally cytokines, and one of them is called tumor necrosis factor, and it's a bad actor. Because if it goes to your joints or if it goes to your intestines, you have inflammatory bowel disease, you might have rheumatoid arthritis, goes to your skin, it might cause you to have psoriasis. Mm-hmm. And we found 2 or 3 other places where it goes and causes problems, and one of them is in the palm of the hand. And that's what we have been working on.
In the palm of the hand, what does this condition actually refer to?
This is called Dupuytren's contracture, mm-hmm. and it starts out as a kind of a localized autoimmune fibrotic condition. And it starts out as a teeny nodule in the palm of your hand. And over time, maybe a year, 2 years, or 3 years, it begins to make cords underneath the palm of your hand, and it pulls your fingers together. Wow. So you can't button your clothes, you can't type, you can't do a lot of things. There's about 12 million patients in the U.S., and 22 million in the European Union, 2 or 3 million in the UK, and mm-hmm. about 20 to 30% will progress to the real contractures and have to have actually surgery. Some famous people: Ronald Reagan had this, Mitt Romney, Margaret Thatcher, mm-hmm. Frank Sinatra, and Paul Newman all had Dupuytren's, interestingly enough.
Now, is this something that can be treated without surgery as long as it isn't the actual contracture where you can't use your hand? Or what's the go-to treatment before surgery?
Yeah, in general, the clinicians, as soon as the nodule forms in your palm, they say, let's wait and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And start to develop the finger contractions. They can treat you with a collagenase, trying to dissolve these collagen cords. Mm-hmm. That's not very effective, and it often recurs, or treat you with steroid injections into your palm. Ultimately, most patients, like my wife, ended up with surgery to actually remove these cords so her fingers can work well again.
You've recently, I understand, completed a phase 2 study for Dupuytren's. Tell us about the study protocol, the drugs used, and any other update on the study that you'd like to fill us in on.
Yeah, our scientists who are working on this, Professor Nanchital at Oxford University, was working on Dupuytren's and these nodules, and he was able to discover that TNF was actually driving the formation of these cords, and that he could inject anti-TNF into this nodule and shut down the whole process. So our trial is based on treating patients very early, before they have any contractures, with a view towards preventing the whole disease and the disability going forward. So we were able to do a 140-patient trial. Half of them got drug, and half of them got an injection of saline into the nodule in their palm. Mm-hmm. The drug we used was called adalimumab or Humora, and it was the only one available that was concentrated enough to be able to inject small amounts into this nodule and actually shut down the formation, the collagen cord formation process. So that's what we used in this particular trial. It's made by AbbVie. It's a very good drug.
So how do you think this is going to affect the treatment and the prescribing of this drug going forward? Do you think it's a huge hope for these patients?
Well, we've had an interesting response in that we have a lot of people who are all of a sudden contacting us and saying, I have a nodule in my hand, where can I get this therapy? The trial was done in the UK. We haven't done any US trials. We will eventually, but not at present. And I guess they don't want to go through the process of wait and see. If we can prevent this thing with an injection every 3 or 6 months or so and take care of these patients, they'll probably do that. Of all the 140 patients in our trial, almost all of them came back for all 4 injections, even though it was a difficult time with COVID and everything else in the UK.
Now, I understand that you've got another trial planned for a condition called frozen shoulder. What is frozen shoulder? And give us a little bit of insight into this planned trial.
Yes, the frozen shoulder is a condition that starts out with your shoulder being extremely painful and eventually goes into a situation where you can't move your shoulder at all because of the fibrosis in the shoulder joint. It's treated again sometimes with steroid injections with our successful. Eventually, the patients have to have surgery. Now, we know that 50% of these patients also have Dupuytren's, and so we think the fibrotic process in your shoulder joint is similar to the Dupuytren's, and so we're injecting anti-TNF into the shoulder joint as soon as the pain occurs, again, hoping to prevent the whole process and the need for surgery.
I also understand that there's another program that you're planning, this clinical trial, the anti-TNF for postoperative cognitive delirium, POCD. Can you give us a little insight into those plans as well?
Sure. What we have found is that when people undergo surgery, especially if it's an aggressive surgery like a hip replacement or perhaps a Cabby's procedure, coronary bypass graft, the tissue damage releases a lot of TNF, and we think that the TNF opens up the blood-brain barrier and allows both inflammatory cells and cytokines like TNF to get into the brain and reside in the areas that are important for dementia or for delirium. Most people think that the delirium after surgery, which is pretty common in 20-30% of patients, they call it sort of post-surgical fog. Mm-hmm. They think it's caused by the anesthesia, but we have some evidence to show it's TNF that's doing this. And so we're going to treat 120 patients either with anti-TNF right at the time of surgery, or alternatively see how this works out. Single dose at the time of surgery. They'll get either the drug or they'll get saline as a placebo, and we'll see if it makes a difference in the delirium postoperative.
Well, you and I have a lot to discuss next time that you come back, or the next few times that you come back, with all of the plans that you have for trials there at 180 Life Sciences.
My pleasure. Happy to bring you up to date. Right. Hopefully the next time we talk, we'll have our frozen shoulder trial done.
Well, Jim, if you would, give us a website where we can learn more.
It's 180lifesciences.com.
Always a pleasure, Jim. I appreciate your time this evening. Looking forward to our next conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with returning guest Dr. Jim Woody, CEO of 180 Life Sciences. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download it SoundCloud, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.